Okay, now we can start. Hey, everybody. Let me get a quick idea of who my audience is. Who here's done an Ironman? Who here's training for an Ironman? Okay. When I say Ironman, and that's a fantastic question, Ironman is generally referred to as 140.6. Ironman 70.3 would be a half Ironman. Who knows all the back history about triathlon, how it started? Everybody? Is this old news? Okay. Feedback. If you look at me blank, I don't know where to go with this thing. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So again, fantastic question, and thanks for helping me out with that. It started, so the birth of triathlon was actually in San Diego, right? And then in the late 70s, some Navy SEALs were over in Hawaii, and there was a few different endurance gigs that were going on over there. One of them was the Honolulu Marathon. One of them was a bunch of cyclists that did this long ride. And then another one was, and I don't remember the name of the country club, but it had this organized long swim. And it was 2.5 miles, right? And this organized long ride was about 112 miles. And then there was the Honolulu Marathon, and they were arguing about who was the best athlete, the cyclists, the bikers, the runners, or the swimmers. And because they were Navy SEALs, they're like, I got an idea. Let's put them all together and see who wins. And that's how it came. That's how those distances came about. So kind of arbitrary. It's since moved from the original location to Kona, where it is today. And then that's kind of where the distances started from. So that's a total of 140.6 miles, 70.3, clearly half that. When you go down to Olympic, it's about half of that, except it's in kilometers. So it's a 40K, a 1.5K, a 40K, and a 10K. So 9/10 of a mile swim, 24.86 mile bike, and a 6.2 mile run. Below that, those are all USAT regulated distances. Below that, when you get into sprint, and shorter, it starts to depend upon the race director and the course that they're setting up. So sprint distance is generally somewhere around 800 yard swim, 13 to a 16 mile bike, and generally a 5K. And then they've got the super sprint, which TBF has been really pushing, which is, I think it's a 400 yard sprint, a 6 mile bike, and a 1 mile run. So oftentimes what they'll do is, if you happen to be at Rancho Seco on their Try for Fun and Try for Real weekends, sometimes they'll do a super sprint first, and then they'll do the sprint. And then actually that's on Sunday. Saturday, they'll do their Olympic distance, and then Sunday they'll do the super sprint and the sprint. And some people are actually fast enough to where they can get the super sprint done and then do the sprint after that. So that's the cool thing about that. And then from there, obviously everything started branching out. Stand-up paddleboards have gotten really excited recently. So you're going to see they actually have a stand-up paddleboard wave. So for people who aren't really excited about swimming, you can do a stand-up paddleboard and then bike and then run. Then they've got the aqua bike, which is just a swim and a bike. And then they'll actually do a duathlon, which would be a run, bike, run. So again, it depends upon what the race director's deciding to do that particular weekend. But that's where all the distances came from. So any questions on that? No? All right. So real quick, just again, curious, it's kind of fun to get to know my audience. What brought you to triathlon?
Got suckered in by a friend.
That happens a lot, right?
He needed a ride to Oregon last year, so I went to Oregon and volunteered, and then he's like, hey, why don't you just come next year? I've already signed up. I'm like, fine, whatever.
Are you Eric's friend?
Yes.
Nice. You see a lot of athletes that come to triathlon from single sports, right? Like, I can bike, let's see if I can do this other thing, or I can do CrossFit, let's see if I can do this thing, right? So what got you into it?
My sister, who has done 6 of them, and I did a super sprint, and I thought, I could do a sprint. Did the sprint, and I'm like, I totally could do a half Ironman. Here we are.
Perfect. Allison, what got you into it?
I was a runner, I was a swimmer, and then put it all together, and I did first triathlon wildflower through team
Nice.
the race funds.
Yeah. Some of the more seasoned athletes all did Wildflower, and everybody seems to remember that Wildflower Festival, which was one of the biggest ones on the entire circuit, as when triathlon was making its meteoric rise. Everybody knew about Wildflower. That was a big one. What did you respond to the email? Are you Mark? Mike? Baum?
Yeah.
Okay. What got you into it?
I was an ultra runner and took an extended layoff, got fat, tried to start running and lose weight, and got injured. Got on a bike and started rehabbing my knee and said, hey, this is fun. All I need to do is learn to swim.
That actually happens a lot. I get a lot of runners, beat up runners that come to me and say, hey, I'm having a tough time with my run. Can you help me? And I'll get them onto a bike, get them into triathlon. And actually that does a fantastic job at rehab on whatever their joints is, because they're still getting their aerobic development on the bike and the swim. And then when they go back to running, oftentimes they do way better than they ever did before, because they weren't constantly beating themselves up just by running. So it's really nice. A lot of triathletes and a lot of runners cross-train with swimming and biking. So we'll get to a little bit of that more down farther, where we talk about how swimming actually makes better runners. But Lisa, what got you into it?
Friend challenged me that I needed a diversion.
A diversion. Nice.
Something else to challenge my life.
Well, we have a celebrity with us in the house. This is Elizabeth Simi. She is on the Athletes in Motion podcast, and they are following her on her road to Ironman California. So I know a little bit about why she's getting into this, but why don't you tell everybody else?
Well, why I'm here now is because I'm training for California Ironman the second time, because I didn't yet last year, sort of. I got pulled off the bike at mile 99 because I was running out of time. So I had made an agreement with myself, if I didn't finish, I would do it again. So here I am training again. I got into triathlon, triathlete, whatever, because I was amazed by Ironman when I'd seen it on TV. And when I found out you could do a sprint distance, which was a little tiny one, I was like, I'll give that a try, and I've been trying ever since, and here we are.
Well, it's in the name, right?
Yeah, keep trying.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly. Well, like most things, I got into it because of a girl, right? She's like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And I'm like, I'll go check it out. And I went down there and I'm like, this is awesome, right? And I've been doing it ever since. So the cool part about triathlon is, with all of those distances, I've been doing this now since the 90s, and unless there is something catastrophically wrong with you, there's very, very little reason why anybody can't do a triathlon, right? And that's just triathlon. I'm not talking about Ironman. I've sat at the finish line of many, 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 many Ironmans, and I've seen all shapes, all sizes, all ages, all cultures, all missing digits, missing limbs. I mean, the stuff that I've seen cross the finish line of an Ironman is insane. So it's hard for me to, when somebody tries to give me an excuse of why they can't do it, it's like, I don't know if I buy that one, right? So most of the time, if you have the time, the means, the motivation, you can do a triathlon. And the distance of the triathlon is going to be heavily depend upon how much time you have to train for it. So an Ironman, it just takes a long time to train for. The hardest part of Ironman is the training. Actually, I digress. The hardest part of Ironman is fitting it into every conversation for the next year after you've completed it. But the training for it is actually pretty challenging. Once you've trained for it, then it's like building a hot rod. It's done, right? Race day, just get in, turn the keys, and drive it. All the work is done. You've done it all with an appropriate training plan. Little plug, get a coach. So the cool part about triathlon is, I'm going to kind of go off some of my notes to kind of keep me on track here. It's hard, but it's doable, right? There's cross training built into it, kind of like what I was saying a little bit earlier. You come from a single sport. If you're just a runner, your knees beat up, right? Your hips beat up, whatever. you get into the bike, it starts, you can continue that aerobic adaptation and not get constantly beat up. Let's see, like I said, provides variety. One of the things that I've noticed with triathlon as opposed to single sports communities is the community of triathlon is pretty tight, right? If you say you're a triathlete, they're like, right? And it's kind of like this cool, like, you do it, I do it. It's a kind of a tight-knit community of very inviting people that are always like, want to work out with other triathletes and invite other athletes into the world. So it's pretty cool bunch of widely diverse athletes. The other thing, the feeling of accomplishment. I mean, once you've done a triathlon, starting with any distance and getting to the finish line, that's number one, it's bragging rights. Triathlon in itself is a little intimidating, and then you start going up in distance, and those are some good bragging rights. So, any questions about triathlon in general? I'm going to get real specific here in a couple of minutes. Okay. I'm like, is that a question? No? Okay. This is a overview, right? So I'm going to go over all of this stuff, Triathlon 101. I'm going to get slightly specific. If you want more in-depth answers, ask, right? Don't be shy. A little bit of feedback from you helps me follow the lead, give the seminar and make it more specific for you guys. So you can go down a deep rabbit hole on any single one of these topics. I'm just going to brush over the top of it, but feel free to ask any questions. So the swim, when you look at this checklist, do you want one?
I'm sharing.
Just
Ask.
got them, so you can share with me.
When you look at the list, what you're going to see is some of the things have asterisks and some of them don't. If there's an asterisk on there, that is, in my opinion, mandatory. If there's no asterisk, that's a suggestion, right? So when you look at the swim, it says swimsuit, little asterisk, you need a swimsuit, right? And when we're talking about a triathlete, oftentimes that swimsuit is a pair of tri-shorts and a singlet. Or if it's dudes, it's just tri-shorts. If women's, it might be a singlet. We've gotten away from just the tank top and you're starting to see more sleeve. They look like a really tight bike jersey. So yeah, that's kind of important. Goggles, I have an asterisk there, but I trained a dude to do Ironman Cabo San Lucas, and he would not put his face in the water, and he breaststroked the whole thing with his goggles on his forehead. He made the cutoff, so goggles may not be 100% mandatory. I'd wear them, so makes it a little bit easier. Brightly colored swim cap. So if you go out to any lake where there's boats, you think drivers are distracted nowadays, right? Boaters, they're very distracted. So the brighter the color of the swim cap, the less likely you are of getting run over by a boat. So it's pretty important, right? Not just a black one or a dark blue one, get a bright one. Any swim cap will work. Sometimes these ones are $14. They're a little bit heavier duty than the cheap ones that they give you. Anytime you do a race, they're going to give you a swim cap, right? That's just part of it, and with your number on it. They're going to give you a swim cap. Those things work for a little while, right? And then when you've got Ironman Lake Tahoe on there and you wear that with pride and then it rips and then you cry a little bit, then you got to put one of these on, right? So, so that, and I think I have it on here. I do have it on there, but I'll go in order. Wetsuits, not mandatory, but it's highly advised depending upon, it's actually, I digress, depending upon the race, sometimes it is mandatory. I think Alaska was mandatory. I don't remember if Tahoe was mandatory or not, but generally when it gets that cold, they're like, it's too cold, you're not going in without a wetsuit. there's always some guy out there, like, you know, burly dude in a Speedo going, I'm going to do this, right? And so what kind of wetsuit, full or sleeveless, depends upon what you're comfortable in. Really cold water, I would go with a full. If you can tolerate the cold, or if it's slightly warmer, then I would go with a sleeveless. It's a little bit easier to move. Yeah, and what I mean by that is full sleeve right here. There's a lot of different wetsuits on the market. The higher end the wetsuit, the more panels are in it, the higher end the rubber. That doesn't mean that it's going to be more durable. It just means it's going to be a little bit more hydrodynamic. Generally, what happens is you've got thinner neoprene in the shoulders for mobility and thicker neoprene down here. This is generally, the rule is 5 mil. You can't go any more than 5 millimeter in a triathlon wetsuit. But that's generally how those are built. They're really, really flexible. So when you're putting them on, they're like packing tape, right? You know, packing tape is like super, super strong until you put a pen to it and it's like snap, right? These are the same things, right? So you got to be careful when you're putting them on to cover up your fingernails. Sleeveless, these are generally less expensive because they don't need all the high-end technology in the shoulders because they just cut them off. You've got more mobility in there, and all of the buoyancy is where most people need it the most because their hips and their feet drag. So a lot of buoyancy is built into the hips and the legs in the sleeveless ones. But these are Blue 70s, great brand. There's a lot of great brands out there, and the best wetsuit for you is the one that fits you the best. There's a couple of things that you can scrimp on as far as like saving money in different products. Don't try to save too much money on a wetsuit, because if you get one that doesn't fit you, it's really going to suck, right? So if you have to kick down a little bit of extra money to get one that fits better, by all means, do it. If you're lucky enough to get an entry-level swim or wetsuit that fits you fantastic, good for you, right? So okay, pull buoy. So there's a pull buoy that, you know, a lot of people use in the pool. That's depending upon how you swim and what your swim coach tells you. That's optional. You don't need that one, but along with the brightly colored swim cap is these guys right here. This is inflatable. These things are spectacular. And a lot of people will resist wearing these. A lot of old school swimmers will not wear these. However, they've become more and more user friendly. Everybody's got an electric key fob nowadays, and where are you going to put your keys, right? So this actually is a dry bag. So basically, this is an inflatable dry bag. If you learn to swim with this thing, and honestly, it doesn't take that big of a deal. You wrap it around your waist, and it floats behind you. And if you're swimming with proper form, you're barely going to know it's back there. So when you've got what?
No, I think it's a snake behind me sometimes.
Oh, once you get used to this thing back there, and again, it doesn't take a lot to get used to, the combination of the swim cap and this thing right here, you can see you. And again, you're not likely to get hit by a boat, right? So you can put, I've got one of my athletes, he always has his phone in here. So keys and phone is always with him. So, and he never has a problem with it. So highly likely or highly advised getting one of these guys. As far as goggles go, same thing on the wetsuits. The best goggle for you is the one that fits you the best and doesn't leak and doesn't continually fog up. This one is the Finis. This particular one, the Finis Energy. This is one of the most neutral goggles I've ever used. I haven't found a face yet that doesn't fit this particular goggle. So it's a really good, it may not be the best one on the planet, but it works for almost everybody. So it's nice to have. You've been swimming long enough, you've probably got a bucket of goggles that you've gone through trying to find the ones that fit you the best. So yeah, just kind of go through, find the ones that fit you the best and use those. But There isn't a best goggle out there, except for the one that fits you the best. Kick fins, towel, snorkel, and kickboard. Those are all training tools, optional. You could use them. You don't need them. You know, it depends upon you and how you're swimming and who your swim coach is and what he tells you to do. They. Questions on anything regarding the swim?
Does the kick fins make you faster? Train
Yes.
with them?
Yes.
And then in the swim itself, when you're not using them, will it make you faster?
I think I understand your question. If you use them in training, is it going to make you a better swimmer overall?
Yes.
Depending upon who you talk to, they will help you develop a stronger kick. I try not to use any apparatus with any of my athletes unless they need it. So if I'm working with an athlete and they kick off the wall, like with a kickboard, they kick off the wall and then they just sit there and don't move. They're just kicking in neutral and not going anywhere. They clearly have a pretty inefficient kick. So I'll give them fins, number one, to get them moving so that we can get the lessons moving along. But also, if you have a really, really inefficient kick, a long fin will help you develop the ability to use your glutes and your hip flexors, because the kick in a swim is supposed to come from your hips. And a lot of adult onset swimmers or cyclists kick with their knees, right? And that doesn't go anywhere, right? You need to be able to kick from your hips, right? So depending upon the swimmer or the coach, sometimes they say that you can develop a stronger kick with fins. I would choose to not use fins and just develop a stronger kick and learn how to do it without the fins. The same thing with, you see a lot of the floaty pants. That's kind of become a thing with some of the companies out there, is they have the neoprene shorts to help you keep your hips up. I would choose to teach my athletes to learn how to swim without any help. And then when they're actually out on the course with the wetsuit on, they're going to be faster. Basically, it's like driving your car all the time with the e-brake half on, and then on race day, you take the e-brake half off or take it all the way off, and you're going to be faster. So again, depending upon what the athlete is and who they are and what they need, I try to use as little apparatus as possible and just perfect the form of an efficient swim. So, and that goes along with the paddles and the rest of the stuff. If you can develop a good pull, they say that you're going to get a stronger shoulder by using that paddle, but I see a lot of people without the most efficient pull hurt their shoulders by using the paddle. So it's between you and your coach and what you think is a good idea. But my thing with all my athletes is fatigue management. I'm trying to get you as efficient as possible and not beat you up. So one thing with the swim, 80% form, 20% fitness. So the swim form, as opposed to some of the other things in triathlon, the form is critical. That's the most important thing about the swim, is your swim form. I see a lot of people in amazing shape, and again, we'll call them adult onset swimmers, people who are fantastic runners and fantastic cyclists, come into a triathlon. Clearly they're fit and their form is terrible, and they actually are creating more drag with this terrible form than the thrust that they're creating by trying to push themselves forward. So if you're not a good swimmer, it's not a plug for me, it's a plug for you. Go find a coach, get some lessons. It makes a world of difference. The also is with regard to running. They have, I love telling the story, there has been studies where they'll take a group of runners and have them do a time trial. And then they'll take half the runners and have them do nothing, and the other half of the runners the following day and go do a swim. And then the following day, they'll go back with the whole group and do another time trial. And the runners who swam, as opposed to the runners who did nothing, actually do better in the time trial, or do better than the athletes who did nothing. So the act of swimming, like motion is medicine, the act of swimming actually is a really good active recovery to get you to a solid run. Also, if you are running a lot, you can use the swim instead of running and going, after a hard run, going to an easy run afterwards, go do an easy swim. And again, same thing, it's an active recovery. You're getting a lot of motion. You're opening yourselves up, and you're going to heal quicker with an easy swim than doing nothing at all. So questions on the swim at all? I probably will come back to it, but anything yet?
Question, the goggles now that have the electronic.
Mm-hmm. So the Form has those. Tier, I think, just came out with those.
Races.
Yeah. Well, there's no reason not to have them. You have a watch, right? All it is a heads-up display. I have the Form goggles. In the pool, I think they're kind of fun. In open water, they're super distracting. Yeah, because you have to have the little GPS thing right there to know how far you're going. It'll still do your stroke count and stuff like that. But in the open water, I'm a little bit more curious about where I'm going. In the pool, it's clear water and I got my black line right there. But in the open water, I kind of want to have a lot of real situational awareness, and that thing's just distracting. And I still have my watch on, so I don't really need it. Not to mention, in open water, generally, you're just out there and going straight. Whereas opposed to the goggles, one of the cool parts is it tells you how fast your last lap was, how many strokes you are, what your SWOLF is, SWOLF, right? It tells you all that stuff, which is kind of cool when you're just doing some mind-numbing training in the pool back and forth and back and forth. But yeah, I wouldn't do them in open water. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, let's move on to the bike. The cool part about triathlon is you get to ride really cool bikes, right? And all of us triathletes, we're pretty much all gearheads, right? We all want cool bikes. So there are multiple bikes. There's multiple courses. So you'll see that I brought out a road bike. That's a triathlon bike. That's another triathlon bike. This is a road bike. Depending upon the course that you're doing, it might have a bearing on what bike you want to ride. Let's just say, for example, you were going to do Lake Tahoe. Well, pretty much any race in Lake Tahoe, but Lake Tahoe 70.3. Lots of climbing, lots of turns. The road bikes just handle better. The time trial bikes, we'll call them time trial bikes or triathlon bikes. When you're in the aero position and you're like this, they're like a rocket ship in a straight line. But they're not the best handling bikes, and they're not the best climbing bikes per the geometry of it. The road bikes are better for that. So for Ironman California or Ironman Santa Cruz 70.3, those are fantastic courses for a triathlon bike or a time trial bike. Like I said, Tahoe, fantastic one for a road bike. I did that one last year, and I had a road bike, and I put some aero wheels on there, and it did much better than trying to handle it. Escape from Alcatraz. They're riding in through San Francisco. Super hilly, super technical. That's better suited for a road bike than a time trial bike. The Icebreaker Triathlon, which is coming up this weekend, the course that they do through Granite Bay, you're better served on a road bike in that particular course. So, questions on bikes at all? No? Okay. So when you look at the checklist, backtrack a little bit. One of the most important parts about your bike is a proper fit. If you've not been professionally fit, do it. A properly fit bike will determine how good your run is. So if you're not properly fit on the bike, you might not run very well off of it just because of inefficient movement. So I'll give you a quick example of why not just, go get it fit. Sure, okay. One of the reasons why you want to make sure it fits is every single time you do a pedal stroke forward, that's a leg press, right? And if I was to do a squat or a leg press, I want to make sure that my foot and my knee has appropriate movement. So for example, if I were to do a step up on this chair and I tried to step up from way back here, it's going to be pretty hard to get up there. But if I were to put my knee appropriately where it belongs, it makes it really nice and easy to get that press, right? Or if my knee is too far forward, it's going to be hard to get up. So you can see why making sure that the seat is appropriate to where your foot is going to have a determination on how efficient you are on the bike. And if you're working so hard on the bike for inefficient form, the run's going to be a lot harder. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So on the bike, it's important, get one. Depending upon the distance that you're doing, I generally have, and I forgot to do it, but I generally have a hybrid up here with a kickstand. If you're going to do a short triathlon, you just need something that has pedals and wheels. I've actually seen people out on some of the TBF races with like aero bars mounted onto a mountain bike. Wouldn't suggest that. The clip-in pedals may give you 75% more efficiency. So if you don't have any clip-in pedals, it doesn't take that much to get used to them. But pushing down is easy. Once you get the clip-in, you've got 3 more quadrants of the pedal stroke that now you can take advantage of. So get those. Helmet, super requirement. Different types of helmets. A lot of the helmets these days are getting more and more aerodynamic, so you don't have to get a super aero helmet like that. You can get one of these guys, which are pretty aerodynamic and breathe a lot better. So you can see that this particular helmet doesn't have a lot of vents in it. So it's going to be aerodynamic. You're going to get really good aerodynamic benefits from it. But you'll see that this one also has a shield on it. So oftentimes what happens is when the wind's hitting you in the face, these eye sockets actually create a lot of wind drag, which is why you see the shields. So but also depending upon how hot it is, oftentimes in Hawaii where it's blazing hot or tropical climates, you don't see a lot of helmets that look like this. You see more that look like that. That being said, if you get a helmet that fits your head, right? It just drives me nuts when I see somebody that looks like a yarmulke sitting on the back of their head. And if they go down, that's not going to do them a lot of good. Or even better, somebody has a helmet on and it's not clipped. That's going to do them a lot of good too, right? So you will get DQ'd if you don't have your helmet on and clipped before you grab your bike and run out of the transition area. When you're coming back into the transition area, do not unclip your helmet until you've racked your bike. You will get DQ'd if you don't do that. As far as the difference between helmets and aero wheels, right? Because it's really cool when you've got aero wheels like this. The aerodynamic benefit of an aero wheel is almost equivalent to the aerodynamic benefit of a helmet. This one is a few $100. These are a few $1,000s. So in a perfect world, you'd get both. But if you're looking for the quickest and the biggest bang for the buck, go for the aero helmet first. Because, again, almost the same aerodynamic benefit. Tire pump, obviously you're going to need that one. Bike shorts, we're triathletes. I generally lean towards the tri-shorts. If you have a proper bike fit, and Rich actually has a saddle mapping system to get the proper saddle, that is very, very helpful. I don't wear bike shorts anymore because I've got a really good fit between me and my saddle. So I just wear tri-shorts all the time. And, bike shorts oftentimes for me is too much padding. So, but if you need the padding, obviously the bike shorts and the tri-shorts are similar. You just can't run or swim in bike shorts because of the padding. It's like wearing a diaper. Jerseys, we talked about that, or the singlets. Sunglasses, those are whichever ones fit you the best. I've seen a lot of people in Gooders, they don't match the helmets. A lot of the higher end helmets, this is actually a good example. You're seeing some of the higher end helmets with a little notch cut out right there, and they're making glasses to fit. So Rich has glasses in there that actually fit right in here. So it's a really good seam between the helmet and the glasses where they come down and fit together. So you're not getting a lot of wind that's coming through the glasses to the top of the helmet. I have road ID on here. Again, if you are out and you get hit, you don't want to be a John Doe. The road ID, you can clip it to your watch or at least carry some sort of ID. Gloves, completely your choice. If I'm doing an Olympic distance or shorter, or depending upon how hot it is, a 70.3 or shorter, I'm probably not wearing gloves. Most of the time on an Ironman, I will wear gloves because it's a 100-mile bike ride, 112-mile bike ride. I'm gonna be out there for a while, so I'm gonna probably wear gloves. Arm warmers, jacket, depending upon what the course has. Sunblock, use it, use lots of it. I think I have heart rate monitor, that's for training. We'll talk about food in a second. The saddlebag. If you don't know how to change a tire, at least get a saddlebag with all the stuff that you need to change a tire. So in case you have a flat and somebody rolls up on you, as cyclists generally do, and say, "Are you cool?" You're like, "Yeah, no, I'm not. I have the stuff, but I don't know how to do it." And they're like, "Okay, I'll help," rather than have them having to donate all their stuff to you. So I've got a friend who just, you open her saddlebag and she's got lip gloss and an ID. That's it. She's like, "I'll just call Uber." Carry the stuff: 2 tubes, 2 CO2s, 2 tire levers, and a patch kit, and a Band-Aid, and a $20 bill. Any questions on the bike? Nothing? No questions at all? What kind of bike you riding?
Ride up my fit with Rich on Thursday now. So
Oh, fantastic.
came in the other day, did the saddles, but then I changed pedals. So I was like, let's just get the pedals on and do everything on Thursday.
Fantastic. What are you riding? Say again?
Giant bike.
Good five. Are you do you come from this from cycling or
No, I come from ultra.
running? You already told me that. You told me that. So ultra running, when we get into triathlon or when we get into nutrition, I took a lot of tips from the ultra runner world. You know, we started getting into this. When I started doing this stuff, it was Whole Foods because there wasn't a lot of gels on the market. And then the industry got flooded with gels. And now it's actually starting to go back the other direction. But ultra runners are running really far, mostly on Whole Foods, right? So I started looking at that and going, why are triathletes trying to power down all this processed sugar when Whole Foods actually work a little better? And we'll get into that in a minute. No questions on the bike at all? Okay, so the run. The swim and the run, in my opinion, are the two hardest of the sports. Now, some people that aren't big cyclists might disagree with that one because there's some anxiety with cycling. Real quick, like there's 2 things that you need to use on the bike. This and this. This is Body Glide and this is chamois butter. You will find out where you should have put this stuff after you get off of a really long bike ride and get in the shower. And your body will tell you where you should have put this. So liberally use this stuff. Running is the highest potential for injury. Swimming is one of the hardest to master efficiency. You're not likely to get injured on the bike unless you get into a crash, right? If you have a deplorable bike fit or unless you crash your bike, you're not likely going to get injured on the bike. But you can easily get injured on the run, and you can easily go way too slow on the swim for inefficiency. So running like swimming, you know, if you can get good run form, that's going to be really important. And when I'm talking about good run form, most of the time what you want to do is take a fast, super fast run and slow it down. We've got 2 distinctive gaits, walk and a run. You know, a horse has got 3. A horse has got a walk, a trot, and a gallop. We've got 2, walk and a run. And most of us know how to walk, so we'll take that walk and throw a little plyometric hop in there and then move a little faster and call it a run. And that's generally not the most efficient way to do it. Running is a separate form. Now, if you research run form, you're going to see all kinds of different reams of stuff on volumes of running. Like they've got chi running and pose method, and the Born to Run had a bunch of stuff in there. There's a few common denominators. There's a few fundamentals that you want to follow, but for the most part, the best running form for you is the one that doesn't get you injured. And if you've got any questions for me on that one, let me know. But there's not one best method of running. There's a bunch of different run styles out there, and not one of them is the best. I'm trying to narrow that down a little bit. If there's one, like chi running, this is the only way you should run, right? What I mean by that is they've taken runners with not the most efficient run form and trained them to run in a completely different style that's air quote more efficient, and they never got any faster. So what was the point? So we want to find what how the best run for you, the best economy that you can have in running the way you run. Sometimes you're going to be a little bit more fore-footed. Sometimes you're going to be a little more aft-footed. But some of the fundamentals, which we've gone, I think so you four have been in my class, and we talk about that. Little bit of a forward lean from the ankles, right? I'm not going to say don't heel strike, because if you've got a higher cadence, which is going to be somewhere between 85 and 95, it's hard to heel strike. With a short cadence, it's hard to get that foot out there to heel strike if you've got a really higher cadence and a shorter stride. So, but I'm not saying don't heel strike, because some people are just more aft. Their foot is just going to hit a little bit more aft than on the toe. Right? That could be just as bad on the toe as it is if you're on the heel, if you're doing it wrong. So same thing. If you've gotten injured running before, highly likely there's something that you're doing that's causing the injury. If you've got plantar fasciitis, that is a symptom of you doing something wrong. So figure out what that is, and generally everything else starts to fix itself. Yeah, so I've got it right here. If you do it right, it's one of the best things that you can do for yourself. If you do it wrong, it's one of the worst, because you will get injured. I think the stats is 65% of all runners get injured every year. It's just because you're doing it wrong. So shoes, you've seen the swing, right? We went from a 0-drop shoe with a Chuck Taylor all the way to a Beast, New Balance Beast with a 12-millimeter drop. Back to the Vibram 5 fingers, like where everybody's doing the barefoot running thing. And then all of a sudden Hoka took off with their massive stack heights. I would suggest trying to lean away from the high stack height shoes unless you need it. And what I mean by that is, if you can't run in anything but a Hoka, well, then get a Hoka, right? But I found that when I run in Hokas, the stack height is so high that I tend to roll my ankles. So the lower the stack height, the better, but get what you need. If there was a big debate upon like the pose method, or somebody running, with a minimal shoe, barefoot, as opposed to a high stack height shoe. Some people are like, oh, you got to go barefoot. You got to go 0-drop. Well, if you spent your life in a raised heel and you go to a 0-drop shoe, you're going to hurt yourself. So do what you need to do, and eventually work yourself into getting a lower stack height and a lower heel drop. Does that make sense to everybody? Yep, I did. I said 65% of runners. Good, I got that right. Well, I can't see this anymore, right? I don't have my glasses.
I know. I'm waiting for you to just get your arms extended there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got measured for a custom bike, and they're like, you have short arms. I'm like, great. So run apparel, don't wear cotton. Handheld water bottles. So it's what you like the best. I actually use the handheld water bottles, right? And I switch off. I'm running like this, and then I'll run like this. I'll switch it off. Some people like the belt around the waist. If I'm going to go for a really long run, I'm going to wear a hydration pack, right? And that's because I'm going out in the middle of nowhere and there's no way to fill it up, right? But, if you're running up to 12 miles and you have, just run an hour and fill it back up and then run the second hour. But you're going to want to get probably 20 to 24 ounces of water or fluids per hour. So always try to run with some hydration. Sunblock, 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 caps and visors, heart rate monitors, depends upon what you're doing with it. Rate of perceived effort's just fine if you're not going to use heart rate monitor. Is anybody using the run power meters? That's a newer thing, is run power meters. I'm not sold on the technology of it yet. Like a bike power meter, you get instant feedback, but they're using your heart rate and it's an algorithm, or I'm sorry, not an algorithm, but an equation of a bunch of numbers that they're collecting to give you the immediate data, when it just sounds like another really cool, expensive tool, where, like I said, I'm not sold on the technology yet.
That's the thing that clips on your shoe.
Well, you can put it on your shoe. Yeah, it's a stride pod. So it measures your cadence. There's actually a pitot tube in there to measure the wind velocity. It's got some cool technology, but it just, so far to me, it seems like a really cool gadget. And the reason I say that is because so much of, I know that we're all gear geeks, right? And if you can get something that's cool and fun, like the Form goggles, it's something that's cool and fun, not necessary. Most of the time, for us mortals, we just need to get out there and get the workout done. You know, we don't need to go on paralysis by analysis on all the data that we're collecting. So, questions on the run? Okay. Flip on to the last page. You're going to see mobility and resistance training. The mobility is going to, I actually combine a lot of the mobility and the resistance training. But the mobility is going to keep you running, swimming, and biking. So if all you're doing is swimming, biking, and running, you're probably not getting your body to end ranges of motion. And what I mean by that is, if you can squat all the way down with your heels flat on the floor, hips to heels, then there's probably less resistance in that kinetic chain, which means you're going to be able to do what you want to do better. If you can't go down that low, then there's resistance in that chain, right? And just like the swim, you are better served working to remove the resistance than working harder to try and overcome it. So that's where the mobility comes in, is making sure that you can get your body into. One of the things that I've noticed with a lot of swimmers that I have is they go to other swim coaches that don't focus on mobility, and their swim isn't that efficient. And it's not because they're a bad swimmer. It's because they don't have the mobility to get their hand right here, right? Their shoulders are so tight that they can't get a really good extension, right? And it's not their fault that they're a bad swimmer, though I can say it is their fault that they don't have the mobility to be a good swimmer. So that's where some of that comes in, right? Also, if you take a tight muscle and then you go beat it up with a run and make it even tighter, now you're risking strain. So that's where the mobility comes in really, really handy. With most of my athletes, I start off with a couple of sessions, almost mandatory sessions per week. And then I suggest, I'm looking at you guys, any one of those mobility workouts, pick the ones that you're not good at and do that more often, right? So for example, if you can't get your hips to your heels, then practice that more often. Questions on any of that stuff? You can ask specific questions if you want.
I still can't get my hips in my heels that way.
It's a hard thing to do. I know I'm kind of bendy and I can do that, but that's something to work towards.
All the things that I got from you that last sheet in your last class, and just continue to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the mobility. Instead of working more towards corrective exercises, work more towards what you can't do. So if you can't get your hips to your heels, well, then that's obviously something that you want to work on. If you can't get your hand right there, then that's something, perfect example, right? Do that again. Okay. See how she can't get her arm straight right there? Right? So an example of that would be, right, and now she's struggling to get that. So one of the things that you could do is just grab a pull-up bar and just hang from it, right? To just try to get your body into that position. You're looking for basic positions that you can end range of motion that you can get into. And if you can't get into those end range of motions, focus on that, and a lot of the other problems generally just go away. Does that make sense? So
here's a question. I'm definitely tight here, right? So, but when I do like a stretch for that, sometimes this back here will just like spasm.
right. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. What Elizabeth is talking about is tight quads, right? You've got three, there's a hip flexor complex, and you've got three quads, the outer, the inner, and then one kind of in the middle. Those things will get really, really tight with all of the leg presses that we do every time we take a step and every time we push down on a pedal. To loosen those quads up, if your hamstrings are really tight, when you try to get back there, and now this is shortened, right? It's going to start to spasm. So the ideal is to try and just, whatever you're doing, try and get that knee behind your hip, right? Most people, as you're all are sitting right now, most people have really tight hip flexors. And that causes an anterior pelvic tilt, right? Which causes lengthened hamstrings, right? There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on right there. So if you can develop your quads, your glutes, and your hamstrings, and get that pelvic tilt to be back where it belongs and not like this, then it's going to really help make sure everything is going to move a little bit more efficient. So if you're standing in the supermarket, just any sort of a lunge position, so you don't have to do anything so severe that's going to make your hamstring spasm, right? If you can just, get into a lunge position and just kind of sit like that, right? If that knee comes up, then you might spasm the hamstring. But if you can just sit like that and just kind of let it sit there and open up, that's really going to be helpful. Make sense? Okay. Sports nutrition. The rule of thumb, and this is heavy rule of thumb, is somewhere around 20 to 24 ounces per hour and somewhere between 100 and 200 calories per hour. There's going to be certain companies out there that are pushing a lot more than that, and most of those companies are trying to sell you something. I'm working a little bit more on metabolic efficiency, so try and eat normally mostly whole foods, so your body isn't craving simple carbs. So if your body's not craving simple carbs, it's not really looking for those simple carbs, you're less likely to bonk when you're out there running. And you start to run out. You've got a finite amount of carbohydrates in your system, and an almost unlimited amount of fat in your system. And you're trying to get your body to lean a little bit more into the fat burning and a little bit less on the carbohydrates burning. So if you're eating mostly whole foods all the time, and then when you come into an endurance setting and you're eating a little bit more of a complex carb and not something so simple and processed, and you train your body for that, just like you train a muscle, you train your body for that and it gets used to it, then you're not having to take in so much carbohydrates, so much gels. You don't have to carry as much. Gels, the gel companies, sometimes they're saying, oh yeah, we want you to get 400 calories per hour. Number one, that's a terrible idea. And number two, that completely depends upon your body type. So if you can figure out what your sweat rate is and then make sure that you're getting anywhere between 4 to 8% carbohydrate for total all fluid intake, that's the number that you want to use.
Salt sweat.
Huh?
If you salt sweat, you want more like Gatorade stuff. Like I sweat salt.
Right. So if you are a heavy sweater and a salty sweater, then yeah, you might want to get some, lean a little bit more towards some electrolyte replacements, but that doesn't mean a carbohydrate electrolyte replacement, right? Because Gatorade's got electrolytes in it, but it's also got a lot of carbohydrates in there, right? So if you're more concerned about the salty sweater and needing enough electrolytes, then you could lean towards a calorie-free electrolyte replacement, which would be like Noon, or I think UCAN has a calorie-free one.
Because I've been using Scratch for a little
So
while.
Scratch is good, but you want to be a little bit careful when you're adding up your overall calorie intake. Scratch is going to have about 40 calories per serving. So you want to use that calorie number and add it to whatever other calories you're taking in to make sure that your overall calorie intake is in that range. That's why I said originally it's just a rule of thumb is somewhere around 20 to 24 ounces of fluids. Notice I didn't say Gatorade, of fluids, and then somewhere around 200 calories. That solution is going to give you somewhere between 4 and 8% over carbohydrate intake for overall fluid intake. The higher you are above 8%, the higher your potential for GI distress. Right? The olden days, it was like shove as many calories in as you could, and if you threw up, you ate too much and back off. We're actually going the other direction now. Eat as little as possible, and if you bonk, let's pick it up a little bit. Right? So now we're not getting potential GI distress, and we're not having to carry as much. Does that make sense? What I was saying a little bit earlier was back in the day, we were using like little fingerling, salted and seasoned fingerling potatoes, and it was fantastic. Right? Salty, right? Complex carbohydrates. And it worked. It's a little messy, but it worked. And then we started leaning in towards all the processed gels, and then lots of people were getting GI distress, right? And spending a lot more money. And they recently did a test where they took a whole bunch of elite cyclists, and they did half of the group was on processed gels, and the other half was on boiled fingerling potatoes. And there was no discernible difference in performance. So potatoes are way cheaper than $3 per gel, you know. But that being said, the gels come in really, really handy because they're easy to carry, right? So if you need one, you know, or if your blood sugar gets a little bit too low, then yeah, do one to get your blood sugar back up. But don't just, you know, the old like one every 20 minutes. Oh God, please don't do that, right? So. Questions about nutrition. Nutrition's a really, really deep rabbit hole, and we could talk about that one all day, but any questions there? No? Okay. For the best way to set up your training is pick a race. You know, some people, everybody comes to triathlon for their own reasons. Some people train to race, some people race to train. You know, some people, it's all about race day, right? I don't like training. It's a pain in the ass. I can't get it in after work. I hate training, but race day, that's what it's all about. Other people, race day is stressful as hell, and all it's doing is giving them something to shoot for and put meaning to their training, because the training is actually where all the fun is. There's not a right answer there. It's just what you want to do. But pick that race and work backwards from there, right? So if that's an Ironman, you're going to want, and I think I actually put this, did I put this here? Yeah. So when you're developing a race schedule, these again are very, very rough numbers because it totally depends upon your ability, your experience, and various other things where you are. But when you're looking to plan a training plan, sprint distance, 4 to 5 hours a week. Olympic distance, 7 to 10 hours a week. 70.3 distance, 10 to 15 hours a week. And an Ironman, somewhere between 13 and 18 hours a week, right? Those are, again, super rough numbers, but that'll kind of give you the idea of, you know, how much time do I have in my life to train, and take that number, and that'll tell you how long of a race that you can do. One of my athletes is like, yeah, I want to do Ironman Arizona. And we figured out how much time she had in a day, and there's just no way. I mean, she had a full-time job and she was studying to be a doctor. There was just no way she had enough time to train that much. You want to take training and move it into your life, not put it on top of your already very, very busy life, because you will get burnt out. And that's not the way to do about this. Make sure you have the time to train. Most people get a fair amount of deferred maintenance around the house when they're training for an Ironman, and the Ironman's over, they can get everything done. Questions on developing a training plan? No? Okay. The next one is having a focus for each workout. So depending upon how many swims, bikes, runs, and mobilities and strengths you're going to do that week, make sure that it's not just all long and slow. Also, make sure that it's not all hard and fast. A popular thing right now is HIIT, high intensity interval training. You know, like, you don't need all that cardio. It's bull. You do need cardio because it's an endurance sport, and that's what we're doing. You can substitute some cardio over strength, but not all. You need both. You need to develop the muscular strength for speed. You need to develop the endurance strength for endurance sports. So you don't have to run a marathon to train for a marathon, but you got to run at least 2.5 hours, to develop the ability to run that far. Just have a specific, your long, slow run needs to be long and slow. Your short, hard intervals need to be hard and fast. If they're not hard and fast enough, you're not going to get the potential development. If it's not long and slow enough, a lot of people, their long, slow runs aren't slow enough because it's boring, and their hard, short, fast runs aren't hard enough because it hurts and it's not fun. But the polarization is actually what gets you the biggest bang for the buck. Does that make sense? So long and slow needs to be slow, almost embarrassingly slow, because that's going to get your aerobic development. If you're running too fast on your long runs, then you're almost giving yourself the same fatigue rate as if you were running even faster than that. And that doesn't allow you the recovery to go harder and faster on your short run. Does that make sense? So, am I going to have to take that away from you?
It was like doing weird things to it. I'm trying to get it back to work.
And I have, as I already mentioned mobility before, I highlighted here again, never underestimate the importance of mobility work. So the best time to do your mobility work is when you have time for it. A lot of people are like, oh, you got to foam roll beforehand and you got to do your stretching afterwards. I wouldn't do any hardcore stretching before any sort of a big workout because that fatigues the muscle. The best time to do the stretching is, separate from your workout. When the day is winding down, instead of sitting on the couch, sit on the floor and do some mobility work with your foam roller or stretching or whatever like that. Or again, whenever you have time to do it. And I got keeping a log. That which is measured improves, right? So if you are keeping a log of what you're doing and you're not happy with your race results, which is just a mirror reflection of the training that you did, then you can look back at your training and say, oh, well, it looks like I didn't do a whole lot anywhere. No wonder I didn't have a great race. Or I had really good training. Then we can start dissecting the race. What went wrong in that race, right? We have to look at all of it so that we can get, be better racing. As far as that goes, the more you race, the better you're going to get at racing. So I think you and I talked about a B race. You generally want to have an A race, a B race, and a C race, or multiple B and C races. Your A race is the one race. If you had one race to do, that's the one. But you want to get a dress rehearsal. And if you're not exposing yourself to that environment, and again, a high stress environment, then the race day is going to be even more stressful. So the more you race, the more you're going to be comfortable with that environment, and then race day is just going to be another day at the office. So,
And if you volunteer for TBF on their races, they give you a little thing and you can do the next race.
They absolutely do. Volunteer for TBF and you get race bucks, right? And then you can just, the more you volunteer, the more you get to race for. It's not free. It's not free because your time is, worth something. But yeah, you're trading time for race bucks.
Yeah.
So, questions on any of this stuff? Don't be shy. Okay, so if any single one of you walk up to me afterwards when we're done here and say, I have a question.
The difference in bike shoes and triathlon shoes.
Thank you. That's a great question. I actually meant to say something about that and I forgot to. So shoes are one of the other things that you shouldn't scrimp on, right? You really, really need shoes that fit you the best. And again, there's not one best shoe. If the road shoe is more comfortable for you, then wear a road shoe. The difference between a triathlon shoe, which is going to have that, it's going to be really quick and easy to get into. If you are trying to save precious seconds in a sprint, an Olympic, or even a 70.3, these are going to make it a little bit quicker to get in and out of. They also, a lot of times you'll see the shoe that's like actually strapped to the bike, so you can do a flying mount and just stick your shoe in there or stick your foot in there. This is made to be able to use the shoe as a platform. So the triathlon specific shoe tends to be a little bit less expensive than the road shoe. I'm not going to say any more or any less comfortable because it depends upon you and how it fits. But the road shoes, they're generally a little bit more secure with the boas. But that's the big difference, right? This is going to be a road shoe, and the triathlon shoe with this is just an easier entry. You know, so if you are putting your shoe on and then running your bike over to the mounting line and mounting your bike and then riding, you're not going to get the biggest benefits off of needing a triathlon shoe as opposed to a road shoe. Does that make sense? So just pick the ones that's the most comfortable for you. The faster you're going, the higher end you are as a triathlete. If you're trying to make the podium or something like that and you're saving precious seconds, well then yeah, something like that makes sense. And that's going to go for anything, right? If you're trying to save precious seconds, then the aero helmet is going to be key. Most of the time, that helmet's just fine. So thank you. Who asked me that question? You did. Thank you for asking me. That's a really good question. I find that the triathlon shoes generally seem to be a little cooler because there's a little bit less bulk there, right? So in hot summer days, my feet are a little cooler in a tri shoe.
Do you wear socks with them?
Personally, yes. I've done the no sock thing and I've done the sock thing. I think that's a comfort level. I like socks. The amount of time that it takes me to put my sock on, I don't need that extra second because the shoes generally chafe my feet up a little bit. Ooh, which by the way, if anybody has a problem with like blisters in their shoes, like running, maybe like end of their toes hurting or whatever, Body Glide works really, really well on your feet. Like take the Body Glide and put it on your toes or your heels or whatever, and then put the sock on over that, and that really helps prevent blisters.
Not numb feet.
For
Absolutely not.
so if that's most of the time a product of not the right fit on the shoe or not the right fit on the bike, right? So you might have the cleat might be in the wrong place, or you might have the wrong shoe, or the bike fit might not be right. So there's a combination of things that it could possibly be. Huh?
The cleat can move?
Yeah. Yeah, the cleats move back and forth on the shoe. They're not supposed to, right? Once you set them, you tighten them up and they stay there. But yeah, the cleat, because you want the optimal position on wherever your foot, the cleat is for how you're fitting the bike.
You can actually turn them in and out a little bit too.
I might have to talk to Rich.
Well, I actually know what he did with you, and it's probably right. And it's a whole nother topic, right? There's a lot of technology that goes on right there. Oh yeah, there's zero float and like a few many degrees of float and different stack heights for different pedals and all that type of stuff. So
About setting up for your transition area.
thank you. Thank you for saying that.
That's a great question.
Yes, I appreciate you asking that because that's what I wanted to show everybody before I left and I almost forgot. So yeah, that's a great way to wrap up this seminar, is showing you the quickest way to run through transition. So you want to make sure that you're setting up your transition in a logic flow, right? So the last thing that you want to do is think. Has anybody ever been like doing a race, like maybe a half marathon or something like that? And then they're doing their head, the math in their head to like figure out how long they have to run. And it takes them like a few miles to figure it out because you're stupid, because you're running and there's no oxygen in your head. So because of that, you don't want to have to think. You want to set it up in a logic flow. So when you get there, there's no thinking involved, right? So that's the way I have this set up. So if you start you finish your swim, the first thing that happens when you finish your swim is I've got my wetsuit on, I've got my cap on, and then I got my goggles right here, right? As soon as I'm going to swim all the way up until I'm grabbing dirt, right? Don't stand up and then walk out. You're so much more efficient in the water if you're swimming. So swim all the way up to the dirt till you're literally grabbing dirt, and then stand up, and the water should be about that high. And if that's the case, then you can just run out. Ironman California, you're going to swim up to a dock, and it's a 45-degree angle. So you hit that, and you just walk up. There's probably people there to help you.
It was interesting.
Yeah, they've got the same one at, huh?
Oregon's the same way.
Yeah, Oregon's the same way. I think it's the exact same dock. I think they moved the dock.
Just bring it with them.
Yeah. So as soon as you stand up, take your goggles and put them on your head. Don't touch them again, right? And then from there, depending upon what you've got going on right here, a lot of races, because they take pictures of you coming out of the water, a lot of races, you'll see me with my watch in my mouth, right? Because you hit the buttons, right? So I don't generally use the multi-sport mode on this thing, because once you hit the wrong button, you screwed it all up. So I'll actually do my swim, I'll hit stop and save, right? I'll take my watch off, stick it in my mouth, and then I'm taking the wetsuit off, getting it down to my waist, right? So as I'm walking, I'm getting down to my waist and I'm walking, right? Then I'll put my watch back on, and then I'll kind of start running towards the transition area. Once you get to the transition area, take your wetsuit, pull it down, step on it, pull it up, put the other side, pull it up, and if you're doing it right, and this is something that you can practice, you can flip it off and then hang it right here. Now that's important to hang it right there. So you see this, the way this one's set up right here, the way it's set up is there's your bag, there's your transition bag, and there is your wetsuit. This is about how much room you're going to have in, a big triathlon. If you were to go to Ironman Santa Cruz 70.3 or any Ironman event, this is how much room you have. There's not a lot in there. TBF, you got all kinds of room, but this is literally how much room you have. So you see, this is a standard gym towel right here, right? That's about all the room that you have. So your transition bag goes right there. When you come up, grab your wetsuit, hang it right here. Don't put it anywhere on there, because the guy that's sitting right here is going to step on your stuff, right? So, and most likely your stuff is going to be right under his rear wheel. So keep your area nice and tidy. So that goes right there, and then take your cap and goggles, throw them down there, and there's your shoes and there's your helmet, right? So now that you just took your cap and goggles off, if you have a setup like a road bike where you see it's hanging, right? Put your sunglasses on, put your helmet on, or if you're right here, just take it, put it on. I'll have a sock in each one of these because I wear socks, right? So I'll put on a sock and a shoe, and a sock and a shoe. All of my fuel is on my bike. I'm fueling on the bike. I'm not doing anything in transition area. It's a transition area, not a rest stop, right? So I'm coming up here, like I said, cap and goggles, wetsuit, helmet, sock shoe, grab my bike and go. It's that simple and that quick. Any fueling that I'm going to do is going to be with the water bottles or the bento box, or if I have something sitting right here, I'm just going to grab it, stick it in my pockets, and then run. That's T1. T2, and that's heavily dependent upon how far your run is from the water. That's going to be anywhere between 2 minutes and 10 minutes. Or for an Ironman, it might be even more than that, because you've got a long way to go. So take a little bit extra time in transition to make sure that you're ready to go ride really far. For the shorter races, you don't need as much time. So T2, your second transition, your bike to run, is much, much shorter, because all you need to do is you're riding, dismount, come up, rack your bike, right? There's your shoes and socks. Take the helmet off. So you put your sunglasses on first initially, and then you put your helmet on. So take the helmet off, sunglasses stay on your head. If you put your sunglasses on afterwards, you take your helmet off, your sunglasses go flying, right? That's why I said sunglasses, then helmet. You get back, rack your bike, helmet goes right there. Shoe off, shoe on, grab your number belt and your hat and run. That was 18 seconds. I'm not even kidding, right? You get in, you hit the button, right? Once you have your shoes on, then just grab your number belt, and as you're running through the transition area, throw your hat on, throw your number belt on, and then keep running. And again, all of your fueling is done out on the course. If you are going to carry one of these because you want to use your own fuel, then maybe you have a gel in here or whatever, and then run with that. Boom, you're done. So, and you can see it's so very, very simple. You know, you're not going to come in here and you're not putting on mascara, you're not taking a smoke break, right? It's just, it's in, it's out, right? I have nothing that I don't need. I don't have a bucket that I can sit on.
Oh,
I don't have a foot bath.
So nice.
I don't have a foot bath. One of the things that you might want to do is have an extra towel and an extra water bottle. So when you come up, if you just ran through the mud or the dirt or the grass or whatever, have an extra towel, a little hand towel and a water bottle, you know, wash your foot off, dry it off with a towel, or just put on a sock over your wet foot, then throw your shoe on and go. So, and that's generally what I'll have, is an extra little water bottle, extra sports bottle right there that I maybe want to take a drink out of or wash my foot off with. Questions?
With a sea of bike racks, how do you make your bike stand out?
So depending upon the event, you can bring, that made me think about, I'm going to get back to that one, but for the bigger events, you have multiple bags. Don't forget that question. For the bigger events, you've got multiple bags, and how do you identify your bag from everybody else's bag, right? The stickers always come off the bags. So find a way to personalize your bag, and I'm talking about the transition bags. You know, find some like duct tape, some novelty duct tape or something to put that on the bag, and then colored crayons or colored markers, and write on the bag, personalize that bag, right? Hey, my bag's the one with the unicorn on it. Oh, I remember seeing that, you know, so try and personalize your bag. But question again? Finding your bike, right? So depending upon how big it is, you can, I've seen balloons, right? The bigger races don't allow you to do that because everybody brings balloons and then it's just a sea of balloons, right? When you come into the transition area first to rack your bike, depending upon what kind of race it is, the racks are numbered, right? At the very end of the rack right here, there's going to be a number on it. So when you're running down the sea of racks, you're going to get to right here and you know what your number is, 116 to 154, right? So your bike's going to be down that way. I have a very unique towel. It's the same towel that I've been, I don't know why, actually I do why, but I've been using the same towel for almost 20 years. And it's a very unique colored towel. So when I know what rack what the rack is, I just run down so I see my towel, and then I know where I am. But when you walk into the transition area and you're setting up your bike, get the lay of the land, right? Know where the bike in and the bike out is, know where the run in and the run out is, know where the porta potties are, and, you know, just find the landmarks that are, you know, adjacent to your bike. And that's going to be a little bit easier to find it as well. But yeah.
And just what you just said when you get there, make sure you actually do go from your bike and find out where you're going to run out and just kind of walk it all before the race, because there's been a few TBF races that I had no idea which direction I was supposed to be going.
Yes.
And it was really hard to find my way out of transition. So it's a really good idea to walk it and know where everything is.
So she was lost in transition.
I was lost in transition. Yes, I was.
And I've actually done that before. I actually did that before. I had when I did a lot of TBF races, I always had a spot. That was my spot. I always went to that same spot. And then my wife came with me one day, so I racked with her. And I came running out of the swim, and I'm like, the hell's my bike? Right? I went to my spot, and my bike wasn't there. I'm like, I can't find my... And then I knew everybody, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't find my bike. And they're like, dude, it's over there.
So and you're sometimes a little stupid when you're coming into transition.
Little?
Yes.
Yeah. So...
That's all.
Yeah. But yeah, you sometimes you'll see like some sort of a marker or balloons or I don't know, something like that. Smaller races you can do that. Bigger races they don't, because too many people try to do that. So yeah, just get the lay of the land. So any other questions?
Don't rely on your volunteers too, because they most know a lot of things out there. I mean, when I did California, people coming into transition from the bike, it was like, Where's my stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people that don't pay any attention at all. Like none. Don't be that person, right? Know everything there is to know about the race that you're doing, because there's other people out there that don't have a clue and they're just in the way. So, and they're using up all the time from the volunteers, because now the volunteers are busy helping people that didn't pay attention. So, any other questions? Thanks for coming, everybody. If you have any question, you have all my contact information on that piece of paper. Read it. Everything we went over is there, and there's probably a bunch of stuff on there that I forgot to go over. So yeah, read through that whole thing. It's a good text. I'm going to do a little bit of editing on this video and cut some of the ums and the ahs out, because I know you guys were like super into, ooh, ah. I'll do some editing on that video, and then I'm going to see if I can post it. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.